and good afternoon. On this wonderful Sunday. I don't really know what the Sunday looks like because I have not left the inside of my house. Good afternoon to everybody. Today we are doing a special to kind of kick off Black History Month, where I want to broadcast Black women and just what we're doing in the world, because we are out here changing lives. We are using our experiences. We are using our traumas. We are using our life to help other women do amazing things. So today I am talking to Beverly Baldwin. She is a caregiver. She was a caregiver of her father for many years, and she is going to share her story with us, but not just share her story. She's going to tell us how, she went through all of those caregiving things, which I also know too well, but also how she took that and still was able to exceed and continue on with her career and life, and just what I really consider cross over to that new normal. Like, I have this thing where I'm always like, I'm creating my new normal. Because it's not what life is not what it originally was when you become a caregiver. So, before we get into that, for those that don't know me, I am Charisma with Charisma Cares. I am a single mom. I'm losing the term single mom and switching over to a solo mom because I heard that better.
Okay.
So I am a solo mom and I travel the world at least 80% of the time. And that is made possible for me through real estate investing. However, what makes me a little different is I travel the world with my son with special needs and a disability. So I know this world of caregiving all too well. And I am always happy to hear someone else's take on it, to learn more on how it can make my journey even easier. So, Beverly, I'm gonna let you tell us about yourself because I feel like the best introductions are done by ourselves. We are our number one cheerleaders.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Charisma, for the invite and the chance to just share my story, and beyond just sharing my story, to help others, because we're in a world where caregiving is a journey that you don't necessarily sign up for. And what I'm finding is that a lot of people don't even know that they're a caregiver. So my journey started about 10 years ago when my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Knew nothing about prostate cancer, never heard of it, but I was always familiar with cancer because I lost all my grandparents with some form of cancer. But it hit a little differently when my dad was diagnosed. And I was very young. I had just started my teaching career. I am a kindergarten teacher. And at the time, I was teaching as well, fresh into my career. So I wasn't in a position where I could necessarily quit my job, but my dad and my family needed me. I also didn't have any friends that could relate to me. People tried, oh, Bev, when my grandma passed, or when my cousin, and I'm like, guys, this is my dad. Right. And I was unprepared for the most part. So I felt like navigating this caregiving journey, I had to learn a lot on my own. So I just want people to know that there are resources out there. It does take a little work to find them, but they are out there and the support is there.
So let's talk about, so I know you said you didn't even know what prostate cancer is. And what's so crazy is prostate cancer is major in our community. Yes. Because our men, our fathers, our husbands don't get checked. They don't like to go to the doctor. They feel like if I don't see anything wrong, nothing's wrong. Right. Yes. And even though prostate cancer typically has some symptoms, they tend to kind of ignore those symptoms. It's not a major symptom. It's not something you can see. And then we're not really pushing for it. Plus, with prostate cancer, they think, oh, I gotta go check my prostate. And I mean, just I don't want to be graphic, but they think of that two fingers test where you go get your prostate.
Yes.
Like men don't
Yes.
like that. And the
Yes.
thing is, we don't even do that anymore in the medical field. Like at this
Mm-hmm.
point, we do a blood test. And
Mm-hmm.
I can actually empathize with your story because I have recently, in the last year, had two very close family members diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Really?
One found it right away. He called me, did the treatment, and he's doing very well now.
Oh, good. Good.
They were diagnosed within a month apart. The other one, he did not do the treatment and he's stage 4 in metastasis. So
Mm.
it
Wow.
is huge in our community. But what's interesting is that it is one of the most easily treated cancers out here,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
that is what's so unfortunate for our men is that if you don't get the screening, you can't get the treatment.
Right. And you won't know. You just won't know. And as you said, if they don't seek it, then it's not there. And it's very much ignored. It's very much ignored. And I've learned from the time of my dad's diagnosis years ago that a lot of the treatment options that are there now were not there when my dad
Right.
was originally diagnosed. So medicine has really transformed in a lot of ways. So there are multiple options out there versus when he was diagnosed, it was radiation and it was you can have your prostate removed. But even
Mhm.
doing that, it was no guarantee that it was just going to be gone. So now there are more options, but men, as you stated earlier, they're just not going to the doctor. They're just
Yeah.
not.
And to even paint a picture about that time, maybe not precisely that time, I was an oncology nurse. And I remember doing those treatments for men. They would have to do seeds. We would have to wear a badge to check in and check out because of the amount of radiation.
Mhm.
It was a major thing. And now, I mean, my family member that went through it and is doing well, it was like a in and out procedure. But
Mhm.
and it was a hospitalization. You weren't just staying overnight. Like we kept
Right.
you for a little while.
Right. Right.
And it is unfortunate. Now, I know you said your caregiver journey started young. How do you mind sharing how old you were when you
No, I was 22.
okay. So
22.
you can imagine at 22, it's not a lot of people going through caregiving. Most of
No.
them are just coming out of college. They're working, they're still clubbing,
Mhm.
most are
Mhm.
not married.
Mhm.
And, y'all, the way I know Beverly is because we graduated from high school, you know,
Woo.
right. So we're the same age. And it's like, that's how I know, like, it's not a lot of us in our early 20s that knew
Mhm.
anything about this. Like,
Nothing.
I
Nothing.
mean, who are you going to talk to? Like you said, it was like, well, I lost my grandmother, I lost this person, but that's different than
Very,
being a caregiver.
very.
So once he got the diagnosis, how did that really go? What was the next move for you all?
You know what? It took a long time for me to digest that he was really sick. I went through a stage of denial for a very long time because you're talking about a man that maybe sneezed once or twice because he had allergies, but I never saw my dad sick. And it wasn't until his diagnosis that it just kind of, for lack of better words, it threw me off and I didn't know what to do. So I went through a long period of denial. Like, no, he's going to get better. Like, we're praying, we're going to doctors, he's going to get better. And in my head, it took a long time for me to digest that that's not enough. Like, we have to decide what next steps are. That includes treatment options. And not so much as just me as a caregiver, but my dad has to make those decisions as well. made them as a family. And I think that was very important too, because we had to honor his request on what he wanted to do. So you're looking at two different sides as the daddy, and I was a daddy's girl, y'all. I mean, still am. He's my angel. So it was very difficult seeing him just kind of deteriorate into this small man, because he was 230-pound man. And when he passed away, he was about 120, 130. And it was unreal to me. So I had to get past the denial part first. That was ultimately, and it took a while, a very long time. And then once we kind of decided as a family on treatment options, it became a little bit easier to accept, because he was able to accept it. And when I knew he could accept it, it made me feel a little bit better. And the ironic thing is, my dad never said the word cancer. He would always say that old stuff. He could never bring himself to say the word cancer. It was, oh, that old stuff came back. So it wasn't until he could say the word cancer that I knew he was really accepting of it. And we all, as a family, were kind of in that same place of, no, he doesn't really have cancer. Like, my dad's not, he's not really sick. No, he's not really ill. And that denial process was a long time. I mean, months. It was months.
And I was going to ask you that because I know denial looks very different. And I tell people that, like, some people feel like they don't, grief in itself looks different, because that really is just the process of grief.
It is.
And, I can, like I said, I can really empathize with this, because I can remember when my son was diagnosed, and I did, it was one of those things where he was still an infant, but there were things he just wasn't doing the way that he should. And at the time I was married, and I shared the story that I kept feeling like something was wrong. But my ex-husband at the time, he said, "You just want something to be wrong." And I was like, well, why would I want something to be wrong? Like, I just feel like something was wrong. And it was like, here we both were the parents, and, it just looked a little different. Like, his denial looked a little different than mine. And I think it was because I was coming from, having a medical background helped me a little bit more, but it kind of helped me accept things a little bit differently, whereas he just wasn't ready to accept it. And then I remember us going to a doctor that agreed with him. So it was like, oh no, you're crazy. Like, I have this doctor that says you're crazy. And I kept going to doctors, and the next 3 doctors said, no, you're not crazy. There's something wrong. But he had to hold on to that. I agree with this first doctor. And that's just the stage that you go through, is that grief. Because even once we got our first diagnosis, I was like, I wanted it, but it was like, wait a minute. Like, I really don't want it. Like, I really don't want this.
Right.
That bad.
Right.
And now what do I do with this diagnosis? I can remember sometimes just sitting there crying, because like you said, you can talk to people, but you really can't talk to people.
Right. It's not relatable. It's, it's not that relatability is not there. And I think people try to be nice and supportive. They do, because I can't say that I lacked for support.
Right.
But it was still a gap in the midst, because they couldn't relate to what I was going through. So I just felt like what they were talking about wasn't making me feel better. It made me feel supported, but it didn't make me feel better.
So let me ask you this, because I know for me, my friend circle changed. For me, it was like the things that my friends now valued, I didn't value, because now as the caregiver, I just looked at things a little differently. Was that like, how did your friend circle change, or did you feel like the dynamics I think it was more dynamics. Did you notice changes in that, especially being younger?
You know what? The funny thing about it, no. Here's why. I've really had the same close friends since middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that the dynamics changed, but as we got older, they began to have ill parents and other things, life experiences that were relatable to me. So
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like we got closer as
Okay.
time went on. But I don't feel there was a change in the friendship necessarily. I
Mm-hmm.
think as we grew, it was more of an understanding
Okay.
for what I went through because now they too are going through it. So now we could lean and support each other because I could relate to what they're going through now.
So when you were going through it, where did you find your support that you could lean on that could um, really understand what you were going through? Were there support systems out there that you found for yourself, or did you have to kind of create that?
Bingo. I actually created them
Okay.
because I didn't know where to start. Now I know that there are support groups out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's more people that's using the term caregiver. But in our culture, we've never really used the term caregiver. It was, oh, we're going to go and help my dad with something or help my mom. But the term caregiver was just never something we use in our culture. And I think we're using it a lot more now. But I think that me start beginning to write and journal a lot was my comfort, was my support. My mom was very supportive. My sister was very supportive, and my best friends were very supportive. And when I say support, there were things like just bringing me something to eat that
Okay.
even if they didn't know what to say, they knew I still had to eat. So
Yeah.
they would bring me food. That was support to me. That was
Mm-hmm.
comforting. Text messages that said, I'm just thinking about you.
Mm-hmm.
That was supportive. Is there anything I can do for you? That was supportive. So it may not have even been in the physical sense, but just knowing that there were people in my corner is what helped me the most. But I did have to navigate creating my own sense of support group for me to get over it because the support is there, right? But I still had to deal with my dad having cancer and then later on, unfortunately, losing his life to cancer. So I still had to navigate that on my own. As much as people wanted to support me in that, they still couldn't relate at that time. So I still had to find some level of comfort and solace and peace, most of all, peace within myself. So writing actually helped me a lot. Um, and the biggest critical point was going to therapy. I know our community shuns therapy, but it helped. It absolutely helped. It creates a non-bias, and nobody's even taking a stance on it. It's someone who is outside of your situation, and they're helping you to cope emotionally in the correct way. Because we all have our own method of coping, right? Some may be healthy, some not so healthy. I wanted to do it in a healthy way. And therapy helped me do that. So that was probably the biggest support outside of my family and friends that I found peace
Okay.
with.
So, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, my friends say I want everybody to go to therapy, and I we were having this conversation, and I'm like, no, I don't want everybody to go to therapy, but a lot of us are dealing with stuff, like
Yes,
dealing with
absolutely.
serious issues,
Yes,
dealing with some serious stuff,
yes.
and you need an outlet. Yes, it's amazing to have your girlfriends, it's amazing to have best friends, but you need somebody, like you said, that is objective, that can come in and help you see both sides of the coin. That
Hmm.
when you go walk through that door, it's about you and you getting better. You know,
Yes.
your mindset, looking at it from multiple perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
bringing that in. It's, you know, and I think it's so important. I even tell people, it may not be the first therapist you talk to. You may
True.
actually have to fire that first person,
True.
but that's okay. That
Right.
is perfectly okay, because somebody out here will click with you and that
Mm-hmm.
person will help you through that journey. It can
Mm-hmm.
be temporary. It may
Mm-hmm.
be, you know, we do it for a couple of months, in a year or two, I need to pick it back up.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it can be so it's so therapeutic.
It is. It
So
is.
how did you find your therapist? Because I know you said a lot of this you were doing by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you say, okay, maybe I should try therapy? And how did you go about finding the right therapist for you?
Good question. So, what made me finally decide to say I needed therapy was thinking about I have just an older sister, it's just two of us, my mom and my dad, right? So, I had to look at it. You use that word perspective. So, I had to look at it like the perspective that my mom was coming from. She lost her husband. That's very different dynamic from me losing my dad. So my mom was losing her best friend. My parents were married for 34 years
Mm,
before my dad passed. So best friends, soulmates. And then my sister, I was the daddy's girl. I was the favorite. Wink wink. I was the favorite. But my sister was a little less emotional. She wasn't as emotional as I was. So it was kind of difficult if I would talk to her. And you know how you talk to people and they don't give you the reaction that you kind of want. They're not as excited as you or they're not as
right.
upset as you. It wasn't matching for me. So I was thinking, okay, well, I don't have any friends that were going through the same thing. My mom, the dynamics was different because this is her husband, soulmate. My sister and I are very different, very close, but very different. So I decided then it was important for me to look for outside help because I've leveraged everything, all the resources I had in my circle, and I didn't feel the healing process taking place. So I had to go outside of that circle. So being a teacher, we do have good insurance.
You
Thankfully,
do.
we have good
You
insurance.
do.
So I did look in the network to see what they specialized in. I specifically went to a grief and support counselor.
Okay.
Um, and I found somebody in the network and I made an appointment for the next week. And it was the first one was good for me, Charisma. The first one was good. So I didn't have to fire the first one, but it just kind of meshed. I felt like it's what I needed at the time. And I went for about a year and that was the deciding factor for me.
And I also let people know, a lot of times if you got good benefits like Beverly does, you probably have EAP, employee assistance programs. So a lot of times those first 3 to 5 therapy visits can be free. Now HR may not tell you you have EAP. You have to
Mm-hmm,
go and say, hey, I need to know about my EAP benefits, and they may look at you
mm-hmm,
like, how do you know that? But
mm-hmm,
you go
mm-hmm.
ahead and you use these benefits that you are paying for, that are provided for you.
Yes.
Most of the time, it's part of your healthcare benefits. So, I
Mm-hmm,
mean, and the EAP gives you that opportunity to try someone out or use up those visits and see how that works
mm-hmm.
without having to worry about that copay.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. Now I know you talked about journaling. How did you go from journaling to your first book that you wrote? Where were you in the process when you wrote about the memories of a daughter's last cry?
I think, I'm going to put this out there. I never had a desire to write a book.
Okay.
Never thought about it. It wasn't on my bucket list or anything, right? But I kept praying and I wanted peace. And I was never much of a journaler until my dad was ill because that was my form, my outlet. So I started when I was journaling and going through, um, it started to become more of a story in what I was writing. And I started praying about it and praying about it. And the Lord kept telling me, you need to put this in a book because somebody else needs to know your story. Because I was so young at the time that my dad was diagnosed, I know I'm not the only person that was going through that. I'm the only person I knew of. But I knew somewhere in the world that there was daddy's little girl that had an ill parent or ill father. Whether it was not going to the doctor in time, not following up with appointments, somebody needed to hear my story because I never want anybody to feel the lack of support or resources that I didn't have when I was going through my caregiving journey. So I kind of wanted to be a vessel for someone else to have an outlet and have a resource and people who look like me as well. So it started from that. And within, I would say it was probably about a year after journaling. My book, Memories of a Daughter's Last Cry, was formed and created and published in April of 2018.
Okay. So tell me, who is this book for? Because as you talk, I'm thinking about my family member with prostate cancer that's stage 4. And it's kind of a waiting game. You know what I mean? You get to that point where it's a waiting game. Like for me, I travel a lot, and part of the reason why I came back is because I'm like, I just don't know. Because you're just waiting. And, I don't know of any books out there by us, that
Mm-hmm.
come from this perspective of being a caregiver that can provide us some comfort when we have these thoughts and we have these difficult moments, or you're sitting among your family members or talking to them and you don't want to say that thing that everybody may be thinking about.
Right.
So
Right.
is this book for us? Who would you say this is for?
So the Memories of a Daughter's Last Cry is a book that pays homage to my dad. So it's going to walk you through the journey that my family took as my dad battled cancer. The good days, the not so good days, and then when he passed away. The Career and Caregiving book, which will be out on February 14th for pre orders, it is a guide for a person who is a caregiver, a woman or man that's a caregiver. And when we think about caregiver, yes, it's for those people who are a part time caregiver. Yes, it's for the person who's a long distance caregiver. Yes, it's for the person who's a full time caregiver while balancing a career. Because oftentimes we have people that fall into a caregiver role and they don't know that they're even a caregiver. So that's for those people who are working, who find the need that they cannot quit their job like myself and they have to work. But you need some sort of balance to maintain your responsibilities as a full-time employee as well as being a caregiver in any capacity that you serve.
Yeah. And a lot of us get stuck in that
Mhm.
because a lot of us don't have the luxury to quit our job and
Right,
be the full-time caregiver.
right.
I mean, gone are the days where you own your home, and you don't have to pay rent, mortgage, and you just need a couple of dollars to pay the bills so you can
Mhm.
stay home with mom, dad, or in my case, my son. So, and some people the question I get all the time is, what is it that you do career wise that you can still take care of your child? How
Mhm.
do you balance out career and caregiving and still provide for both?
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, you were at the start of your career going into something new, and then you still had to figure out caregiving at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you navigate both of those?
I think one of the things I had to really learn was that no means no, and creating boundaries. As a teacher, we are never just done at 3 o'clock, never even done at 5 o'clock. But I had to have a cutoff point with my job. By 4 o'clock, I don't open my work computer anymore. And when I get home, it's all about family. And I think it's important for us to know and understand that when you say no, no means no. If you can't do something, to not feel obligated to do it. If you can't do it, you honestly cannot do it. And then something else I had to learn too. I know we don't want people, we hear it all the time. I don't want all these people in my business and I don't want them to know everything that's going on. But you would be surprised at coworkers and your bosses and managers who are really on your side if you just, like they say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So when I knew that my dad was really sick, I opened up to my principal and let her know what was going on. And she was very open with me. I even had the ability when he was in the hospital, she would allow me to leave on lunch break to go check on my dad in the hospital. So if I was 5 or 10 minutes late coming back, it was okay. And just those small things were monumental for me because at work, mentally, I'm still thinking about my dad and what, make it, oh, is he okay? So I think it's also important to let people around you, you don't have to tell them everything that you're going through, but I think it's important to allow people to be there for you, allow people to support you, because you would be surprised at the amount of support you would get if people know what you're going through. Because those are really how those support groups are formed. They're all people who can relate to each other. And now that caregiving is this thing now that a lot of us are falling into, there are caregivers everywhere. And there can be something that you can latch on to that's beneficial for your dynamic in your family. So saying no and creating boundaries and just opening yourself up a little bit were the biggest things that I had to do.
So, I mean, all of that, I would say is so true. I
Mhm.
still struggle with no. I
Of
still,
course.
I still struggle with no. But it's one thing
Mhm.
that you said that really stuck out to me was letting people know. I
Mhm.
am such a private person, and I'm
Yes.
so great at adapting and covering things up and making people think everything is 100%
Okay. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That I will say that in the beginning I suffered in silence. Like I did not tell my job.
Mhm.
Unless you were my close circle, you did not know. Like there were so
Mhm.
many people that didn't know what I was going through. I really felt alone and isolated. And I mean, I don't know what it was that made me start sharing my story, but it was like once I started sharing my story, everybody else it was all these people that had a similar story.
Right.
It
Right.
it
Right.
wasn't my exact story, but
Mhm.
my life as a caregiver of my son is similar to your life as a caregiver of your father.
Mhm.
It's a similar dynamic as far as just being a caregiver and some of those emotions that we go through
Mhm.
with grief and, the appointments. I'm sure you went to tons of appointments and
Yes.
hospitals, and I have a book that I keep where I write all these things down, and all this.
Mhm.
But until you open up, right, and have that dialogue, even with you and I, it was something that I think you said, and I was like, "Hey, what do you do, or what do you have?" You told me about
Mhm.
your book, and it's
Mhm.
like, "Wait, you've been a caregiver. You're a caregiver."
Right. Right.
But it's like until you say something to somebody,
Nobody
nobody
knows.
knows. So you just
Mm-hmm.
continue to suffer. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
very hard lesson for me
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
ask for help
Mm-hmm.
and accept help. And,
Mm-hmm.
and
True.
realize that just because somebody said no one time, that I could actually still go back and ask again. It may just be that they weren't available
Right.
that
Right.
time. Because a lot of times they're
Right.
like, oh, well, if you didn't do it this time, I'm just never going to say anything else
Right.
ever again.
Right. Right.
So I think those are very important things to learn and extremely important lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how did you deal with the emotions after your father passed away? Because I know
Ooh.
those, you have this combination of emotions. You have the grief of it, but you also kind of have relief that a lot of people don't like to talk
Mm-hmm.
about because it sounds bad.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I definitely agree because as you said earlier, everybody's process of grief and loss, they deal with differently. Um, I would honestly, y'all, I was an emotional wreck. After my dad passed, I went through this denial phase again. Like he's coming back. He's not really here. And I say that because I found myself, he loved Milky Way chocolate bars, right? So I would find myself going to the store and I would still be buying all his favorite stuff to take to the house and realize when I
Mm,
get there, he's not here. Like he's not there anymore. So I went back, like some of those phases of grief you think you have entered out of, but then it kind of resurfaces just depending on how you've dealt with the previous process. And it just happens. And for me, it's been 11 years now since he passed. And I've just learned how I've never gotten over him not being
right.
here. I've learned to cope in a better way with him not being here. But I was an emotional wreck for a long time when he passed, going back through the denial phase. But as you said, I did have a sense of relief because the one thing my dad said before he passed on his deathbed was he didn't want to suffer. So knowing that he wasn't in pain anymore, and it's odd because I can tell myself that, but when an outsider say, "Oh, they're not suffering anymore," I'm like, "What do you know? He's not
Right.
here. You can't
Right.
tell me that, you know,
Right.
you know."
Yes.
So I can tell myself that, knowing that he's not suffering anymore. But if I found it a little offensive when people outside would say it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of a roller coaster of emotions. But what really got it was after I published my book and I began working with different cancer organizations. The first one was the Georgia Prostate Cancer Coalition, an organization full of men, survivors, and women who are in support of their husbands, and also an organization called Georgia Core and Prostaware. And what I found was the opportunity to share my story with those people on how imperative it is to not be in my situation, and to not be there is early detection. So I would be a part of health screenings, and that was like the light bulb, like this is the work that I'm supposed to do to help someone else. And from there it just kind of skyrocketed. And my emotions, it doesn't, Father's Day still is sad. The holiday can still be sad for me. But knowing that I'm helping others that are on a journey of healing themselves as a caregiver and full time worker is what makes me want to get up every morning just to know I'm helping. Because that's all I really want to do is help those people and give them the support that, or the resource that I didn't necessarily have back then.
And I
So,
think it's something about using your voice to share and
yes.
talk to other people and bring awareness and show
Mhm.
that you're there. And it's like, as you're helping them, they don't even realize they're
Yes.
helping you.
Yes.
Like, you
Yes.
like
Yes.
every time I speak about it, it's like, yes, I'm helping you, but I'm helping me. I'm speaking to me too. You
Yes.
know, this
Yes.
this helps me in honor of, this individual. This helps me
Mhm.
get this out. If I can just say
Mhm.
one life, if I can reach out to one person, and having people come back to you and say, that really helped me. Like, I don't even
Yes.
know these people. And it's
Yes.
like, you
Yes.
helped me so much. It's just
Mhm.
like, wow.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Even something as simple as a smile, because I have done charisma, I've done so many health screenings, and I would be the person that registers the men, and just seeing their facial expressions of fear. And some of them come alone, some have come with their wife, and you can see the sense of fear or uncomfortability that they have registering. And just knowing that you can provide them with a smile just to ease their mind, just those little small things that we can do to help somebody, is it just makes a world of difference. It just really, it makes a world of difference.
yeah,
So
yeah, I can imagine. So, you've gone through all of this. You've taken care of your father. You've written your book. You're helping other people out. What made you say, okay, now it's time? Because you said you never wanted to write a book.
no.
Now you're on book number 2. So what what made you say, okay, I need to educate people a little bit more. I need to go a step further.
So the both books are very different. So the first book just pays homage. It's pretty much telling my story of what I've gone through. The second book is more of a guide, because I would have people that, like yourself, would ask questions about, well, how were you a caregiver balancing working full time? And I think the more questions that I got from that, I said, hey, that could be book number 2,
Right.
because there are a lot of experiences and stories that I can share. Although everyone's experience is not going to be the same, I think it's imperative just to give people a guide or overview of your experiences, because someone can always find something especially in the world of caregiving, they can find something in your story that can help them, even with just setting boundaries and saying no. There are so many adults, people all over that struggle with saying no, because we want to be nice, because when we know when people tell us no, we feel like it's a form of rejection instead of it being something else. So I think the more questions that I got from other people, and looking on the bookshelf and not really seeing me in it, made me want to provide that an additional resource for people who may need it going through their journey.
So it's interesting because if I remember correctly, in high school, you were always extra nice. Like, I don't think I ever remember you ever saying no. Like, do you feel
No.
like, what I mean? Some people are just extra nice, and they're always helping people, right? Do you
Mhm.
feel like that was who you were?
I do, because my dad was really nice. Like, he didn't. So it was more like, and he was a pillar. He was a deacon in the church. He was the chairperson over church. Like, he served in all these different capacities. So I'm like, well, if he served in all these capacities, he couldn't tell people no. He was,
Right.
he was doing all this stuff. But the part that I learned from him was the balancing part. Because if you I find now, because as in high school, we don't have as many things on our plate, or didn't at that time, as we
Yeah.
do now. Life is lifing, right? So now sometimes I feel like I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. Or it might not be an no. It might be not right now.
Okay.
Maybe in another week, or let me table it right now today and then get back with you. And it's hard, especially as you said, because I was always, and I'm still extra nice now. I'm still nice. I'm still nice. But I think in order for you to have enough to give to yourself and your family, there has to be some form of boundary. Because as long as you're giving, people are going to take.
This is
They're
true.
going to take, you know, and if you don't set your boundaries, they'll take until you have nothing left.
Right.
Nothing left. And you have to learn that, because if you don't, unfortunately, you're going to learn it the hard way. And you're going to be at ground zero trying to give, and then you have nothing to even give to yourself. So,
And that's the point I kind of wanted you to drive home. How do you go from that person that's always saying yes, or, some people may be people pleasers, or however they identify, and then you turn around and, you start saying no, and how that, because it's hard when you
it
first start
is.
saying no. It was
It
very
is.
hard for me. Initially I would say yes, and then I would come right back and be like, no, I can't do it. So then I would feel even worse
Mm-hmm.
when I knew I should have said no in the very
Mm-hmm.
beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, someone told me, they were like, no is a whole statement. Like, you don't need any other
Yes.
words. That's the whole
Yes.
sentence. It's just no.
Yes.
Um,
With no explanation. Like
right.
it's that. But the thing is, the people that know you will understand. I mean, if they truly
That's
know
true.
you, if they know you and understand your life and experiences that you have, there won't be a question of, well, why? Because they'll know. And if you say yes, people are gonna say something. If you say no, people are going, they want people talk about people. They
Right.
always talk about people, whether
Right.
it's good or bad. And you have to know that whether they're talking, you don't let them talk, because you know you, and you
Right.
know the work that you're doing to help someone. And if no, that one time, that's not the person that you need to be around anyway. So
Mm. That's true. That's true.
yeah,
I didn't look at it that way.
yeah.
But you're right, because that person will have your best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Mm-hmm.
would truly know that.
Mm-hmm.
So for the audience, I did put the website there for you to take a look at her site and her book. And the pre-orders are coming out February 14th, correct?
Yes, February 14th, Love Day. Caregiving is a work of heart.
Yeah, I love that. It really is. It really
Mm-hmm.
is. Like you said, it's not something that you choose, but it is something that you have to accept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I really love that. If you all have any questions for Beverly, let me know. I know I have my audience is a little of everything. There's some caregivers in there. There's, people that travel, people that invest, but I feel like caregiving is one of those things that we don't talk about. So wherever you are in your journey, you may end up being a caregiver. And like you said, some people don't even necessarily realize it at the time. They're providing care.
Right.
I mean, at one point, I was caring for my grandmother and my son at the same
It's a
time. I don't
lot.
know how I was doing it. I was still working, like you
Mm-hmm.
said,
Mm-hmm.
because not working was not an option. And I was
Mm-hmm.
still moving forward in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I wish I had your book to tell me, this is the way you do this. And girl, say no and set some boundaries,
Yeah,
because I mean that is so necessary. I've
it is.
never, I lost my grandmother, but like you said, that's a little different than losing your father. At the time, my grandmother was on hospice, so it was
Mm-hmm.
very, you know, I was a hospice nurse for years, but being a hospice nurse does not prepare you to be the family member.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not sure if you all did hospice or how that went for you all, but it was just different watching
Mm-hmm.
that process take place.
Mm-hmm.
But having them available to help me and my family through it, I mean, I needed that. We needed that,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know.
And
So,
it and I'm definitely, my condolences to you losing your grandmother. Um, my dad didn't make it to hospice. We were actually in the planning phase where we were getting a hospital bed for the
mm,
house, and within 2 days he had already passed away. So he didn't make it. He didn't quite make it to hospice. He actually died in the hospital.
mm,
So we didn't make it that far in his journey. We were actually preparing him to be at home in the comfort of his own home, but unfortunately he didn't make it. So
Yeah. And one thing that I think in our community we don't realize when we hear hospice, people are like, "Oh my God, hospice."
Yes.
But what
Yes.
people don't realize is that you can get hospice earlier, much earlier to help you in the journey. We were kind of the same way that you said you were. Your father was in the hospital. My grandmother was in the hospital, and we literally transferred her directly to hospice care. And
Hmm.
she held on for a few days because for her it was a stroke, so it wasn't something that we were even prepared for, you know.
Gotcha.
But hospice is available for, I tell people, you are paying for these benefits. You've been paying for these benefits all your life, but
Hmm.
we are underutilizing our benefits.
We are.
With hospice you get your medical equipment, like you said, your hospital beds, your oxygen,
Hmm.
if they need bed pads. You get
Hmm.
a nurse that comes in, you get a CNA that can come in and help you,
Hmm.
with your loved one. They have a chaplain, they have a social worker that can help you put
Hmm.
things together. And I feel like this is not a conversation that we have a lot because we're so afraid of this side of it,
Yeah.
the passing part of it. But a person can be on hospice for months and they
Hmm.
don't have to be at that very last stage. I
Hmm.
tell people, if you think you may need it, call them, because if you don't, they'll tell you you don't qualify. But if
Right.
you think you may need that help, I've had patients where it was like, yeah, I don't know if you really need to be on hospice, but let's see what happens over the next 60 or 90 days.
Hmm.
And I've had patients where we go in there and I went in there, got their medications together, got them on a regimen for pain, and in some cases discharged them from hospice. And that may not be the case for everybody, but when I tell
Right.
you, it brings so much help to the family. It brings so much help to just your life. Like,
It
it's
does.
hard to function. You know, like I said, I was a hospice nurse for years, but when
Hmm.
my grandmother ended up in hospice, I could not function. I was running off of fumes, working, like you said, how you took your lunch breaks and you would go to the hospital. Like, I don't even know how you did it when you were a teacher dealing with children and
Hmm.
dealing with your father. How, like, I felt like I was running off of fumes.
Hmm. All the time. I mean, you never really felt rested, but when it's go time, it's go time. It's almost I kind of use it with the analogy. Have you ever been so tired leaving work and you don't go to sleep on the road, nothing like that, but you get home and I'm like, well, how did I get home?
Yeah,
Because it just goes by so fast, and definitely running on fumes, but there's nothing that I wouldn't do for my family.
right.
So in the midst, you really don't have to think about it. You have to, it's go time.
Autopilot.
Dad needs this. I can't not work, so I still have to go to work. I have to make it work. And I think it still goes back to what we were saying earlier about allowing yourself to be open, because you don't know what resources are out there. Like, you're suffering in silence, like you said, and you don't necessarily have to. Now, does everything work for you? Not necessarily, but you have the ability to try it out to see if it works, so you can pivot to the next thing. And that's what options give you. That's really what they give you.
Yeah, you're right. And as you talk, I'm thinking, because I remember my grandmother was in hospice. I was working, family came up, they were taking care of my kids because I was my grandmother's POA and I was just that person for her. We were extremely close.
Hmm.
And they were taking care of the kids. I don't know what they did with the kids. I'm assuming the kids ate and went to school and they were functioning. Like, I don't even know. Like, I think I was sleeping at the hospice. I have no idea. I would go to
Hmm.
work, and like you said, people were coming in and they were doing things and they were making it work. And I don't even remember asking. I just remember them I think they just jumped in because somehow the kids were doing great. Like, you know, life was still moving. But it was still, like you said, a daze. Like I feel like that entire time, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you were driving along and it was like, hey,
I'm at home.
yeah, it was that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Brown Sugar Babe said, I had plans to travel soon, and I just got hit with news my sister has cancer. Though there's some family available to help caregive, I can't help but feel I should be here too since I have the least responsibilities. How do I avoid feeling resentful if I stay to support and avoid feeling guilty if I do pursue what I had planned for my life? What are your thoughts, Bev?
Good question. Very good question. I think a sense we all feel a sense of guilt or being or resentfulness. But I also think that it's important for you to take care of yourself as well. We throw out the term self care a lot, and everybody's self care looks different. Um, and I do believe that you can be of support while you're on vacation. Phone calls, video chats, sending care packages, that's still all a part of caregiving. So I definitely think that if that can be balanced while you're on vacation, I definitely think you should take that time um, for yourself. But there's also ways that you can still be here without being in the physical sense. Like I said, calling, texting, video chatting. I think all those are other resources that can be used in the caregiver world and journey.
I agree, and I think those are some good things. I mean, those are some good options. I didn't even think about all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think of my family member that's going through things, and we do calls, but I didn't even think about doing a
Mm-hmm.
care package or things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature.
That's still a form of support. And I think we don't think about it because we think that, well, I physically have to be there.
Yeah,
But you do have caregivers that are long distance caregivers. So it might even be where you have a neighbor that goes and checks on your loved one if you're close with your neighbors. So there are other forms out there and resources that can be used. And I think um, through prayer, I always pray, y'all. I mean, it helps a lot because you always will still feel some sort of guilt because that's your family member. You love them, you want them to be better, but just make sure that you're using your other resources that are out there too.
yeah, I didn't consider that, and that is very true. Like you don't have to physically be there to be that person. And, when you talk about the guilt versus the resentment, I think that's really hard for us, because you do have to, people give up a lot when they're the caregiver.
You do.
Whether that's emotional, financial, physical, no matter what that is, people
Mm-hmm.
give a lot and it
Mm-hmm.
requires a lot of you. And a lot of times we're not pouring back into ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have dreams that you want to do, if you want to travel the world, if you want to just kind of live that out, I always tell people it will always be a plane. There will always, when you feel like you need to be back here, you can always book that flight
Mm-hmm.
and you can
Mm-hmm.
come back.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to feel resentful. You don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I gave up my life. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I had hospice patients that may have been on hospice for 2 years. There were people that expected, the doctor said, oh, it's gonna be 2 months, and it was 2 years. So they began to feel resentful. And it's
Mm-hmm.
that balance. It's like, well, I don't want them to pass, but I kind of plan life
Mm-hmm.
for this. And then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I shouldn't feel this way, but I do feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people that after their loved one passed, they they felt some relief because it's like now they get to live a full life
Mm-hmm.
that's not, it doesn't include that caregiving portion, you
Mm-hmm.
know, especially for that person that was the live in and they did every single thing. It changes your dynamic so much. And you sometimes
Mm-hmm.
have to say, man, I don't even know what to do now. Like, I can't even imagine if I don't have my son, who am I? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a caregiver, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Who am I? So, you know, you have to, I think you have to look inside yourself and decide what is it that you are capable of giving to this family member? What is it that,
Right.
how can you be of assistance? Because
Mm-hmm.
being there, if you're going to be resentful, is not going to be that helpful.
True. True.
If
True.
you say, well, I'm just going to push my trip this way, or I'm going to change, you know, whatever it is that you want to do, just decide how that looks for you because you still got to take care of yourself too.
Right. Can I
Um,
make another suggestion for brown sugar babe too?
mhm.
And this is something that helped me as well. Y'all, my family, we're an eating family. You would be surprised. You can go over to your sister's house one day and you can actually meal prep her food for the week. That's a sense of support. And I think we have to understand what support really is because we think if we're not physically there, we're not supporting. But it's not true. It's not true. Because she still has to eat every day. You can meal prep her foods for the week. Um, you can, as I said, you can have a neighbor go over and visit with her or sit with her. You can have a care package delivered. These are all forms letting your loved one know that you're still thinking about them, that you still care. And it is a form of support. It definitely is still a form of support because, as Charisma said, if you're physically there, but let's say that you're physically there, just as for anyone, you're physically there, but you're negative or you have all these different emotions. As you said, it's not being beneficial for you or your loved one. So I think that when you use your resources outside of the physical part of being there, I think that will help too to kind of alleviate the resentful part. But definitely, because we used to meal prep for the week because during the week we just didn't have a lot of time, and you would be surprised how much support that renders for your sister and your loved one that you're caring for too.
And I would say another thing is providing respite. So, for those that don't know
Mhm.
what respite is, when you are the primary caregiver, there are times where you need a break. You are tired, you need a break, but there is nobody around to give you the break. I don't necessarily need somebody with me 24/7, but I tell you, if you can give me 3 days off where you can take, I know that my loved one is taken care of. I don't have to worry, and I can take those 3 days to focus on me, regroup,
Mhm.
replenish. Those 3 days can be worth so much.
Yes.
You're not there every day, but those
Yes.
3 days will, I mean, that may carry me for the next 6 months.
Yeah. Because you can't pour. I mean, and it sounds cliche, but it's true. You cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah,
You can't. Like you cannot. You have to take those things into consideration because you can't pour from an empty cup.
right. Brown Sugar Babe said, thank you. Just hard to register in my mind that I can be supportive without being physically there. I love my sister to death and feel like at least some of my support should be physical. Yeah.
And it
And
can be.
right.
And it can be.
That's a
But it's
decision.
still but it's still support by not physically being there too.
Yeah. Just getting that in our mind, I think it's a different way of thinking.
It is because, like she said, you love your family members. You think that you have to be there because I always felt like I had to be there when my dad was ill, but I knew I had to be at work too. I had to. You can't be in two places at one time. So it definitely is a balancing act, but it's also a mindset. It's a mindset. If you think that it's not support, then it's not going to come off as being supportive. If you think I'm supporting and I'm doing X, Y, Z, then it's going to be understood to know that it's support, some form of support.
Yeah. And support just looks differently. I mean,
It
it could
does.
be the phone call. There were times where, I mean, people would say, hey, I'm gonna bring you lunch. You want me to bring you lunch? I mean, and I don't even know when I had last eaten. So lunch
Mm-hmm.
sounded great.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to
Mm-hmm.
just come sit with you while you take a nap,
Right.
whatever it may be. Dorora said, tell me if I pronounced that right. Am I still a caregiver?
Diora H.
Yes. Am I still a caregiver if I don't live with my loved one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Caregiving can look different. It can be long distance. And let's say you're a caregiver and you don't live with your loved one. Technology has evolved so much now to where doctor's appointments, they will let you video call in and you can still be a part of the doctor's appointments. Um, so that's another way that you can still be a part, not in the physical sense, but you're still there. You're still aware of what's going on. So, absolutely, if you are not living with your loved one, you are absolutely considered still to be a caregiver. Absolutely.
I remember when, my grandmother, it was at a point where she was living by herself, but there came a time where she could no longer live by herself. And we had to make the difficult decision for her to go to the nursing home because she I personally could not be the caregiver of my son and the caregiver of my grandmother. And I have a daughter and I was working. Like it was impossible.
Mhm.
It was only one of me, and I think I would have just went crazy if I just couldn't do it. So she had to go into the nursing home, but I made sure I was present there. So I was still her caregiver, but I was present. They knew I was coming. They knew I would pop up at any time. They didn't even know what time. I didn't want them to know what
Mhm.
time I would pop
Mhm.
up, but I was still her caregiver. I was still her caregiver until her last breath. I was
Mhm.
still there when, things got tough. If they needed me, if she was in the hospital, I I just had to make that difficult decision for
Mhm.
her to go into the nursing home. And, of course we did it as a family, but it was hard. But yeah, that still made me and my mother the caregivers for her.
Mhm. And that's as we were sharing with the last question. That's when you pull out all those resources of video chatting, of using your neighbors, of sending caregiver packages, because patients, they need a lot of stuff, and you're caring for the things that they're not able to do on their own. And those encompass those day-to-day basic necessities. They have to eat, they still have to go to sleep. These are things that still has to happen, and making sure that they eat from a long distance can still be done, because you can meal prep. You can have those meals sent to the home. You can send groceries to the home. So I would definitely say that just because you don't live with your loved one, there are other resources that can be utilized to still be a part and present and consider a caregiver.
So, Beverly, you named so many things. When I tell you when my grandmother passed some years ago, we didn't have any of that. I know you didn't have any of that either.
No, not at all. Not at all.
We
Not
didn't
at
have
all.
any video chatting. There was no ordering groceries.
None.
As you say these things, I'm like, this is quite amazing.
These are
How
things we don't think
far?
about, though. They're
Mhm.
things we don't think about because, again, we're thinking we have to physically be there. But the thing is, even if you're physically there, there's still things that has to be done being there.
Right.
And the
Outside of the home.
food thing, the food is just one entity that can be done whether you're physically there or not there.
Yeah. And I think we harp on the food thing so much because I think we talk about it, but I agree with you. I think we focus on that so much because when people are going through grief, whether it's caring for the parent, whether it's caring for the child, if someone just had a miscarriage, if someone just lost someone, the first thing we forget to do in that moment is eat.
Yes.
We forget to
Yes.
eat. We forget
Yes.
to drink. We're in this mode where we're just going by, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
if you're not having any nutrition, you can't do anything. You're just laying there.
You
You're
can't even
not
think rationally.
right, right. Like you can't even think to make a meal.
Mm-hmm.
Like and then God forbid you got somebody else to care for. You got, if you got kids or something,
Right.
you're like, y'all gotta eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's a big deal. It's a
right.
big deal.
Those basic, you have to eat, you need to shower, and
Mm-hmm.
you still have to go to work and be that
Mm-hmm.
person in the
Mm-hmm.
morning. So the
Mm-hmm.
same way you are listing all of these things, I wish I had this guide that you're releasing out for us that said, this is normal. These are normal feelings. And this is the way you can combat this. This is the way
Mm-hmm.
that you can make it through this. There are actually
Mm-hmm.
steps here.
Right.
There are
Right.
steps to doing this.
Right.
So I think that is so really important. And that's why, I was like, I really want to talk to you because we don't know where this is. We don't know where to find it. We don't know that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was only one book that I knew about when I got into this caregiving journey. And I think it was called like Unplugged or something of that nature. It's a Christian based book and it came with like a little workbook. But of course, she didn't look like me. And I didn't feel like she would, her journey. I felt like my journey was different. I think we all feel like we're on our own separate.
Planning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And nobody
Mm-hmm.
else's journey is like my
Yeah.
journey. So nobody else understands what
Yeah.
I'm going through. So to see, okay, you understand what I'm going through and you can help me through this and you can help me push forward, I
Mm-hmm.
think is really amazing. Brown Sugar says she appreciates this discussion and the insight because I
Oh,
just think
yay.
nobody is talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So Brown Sugar,
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy that this helped you. If
Me too.
anybody else has a question, comment for Beverly, go ahead and let us know. In the description is the information to contact Beverly and her website to order her first book or pre-order the second book. Can you tell us those books again, Beverly, and where we find them and connect with you?
Yes. Memories of a Daughter's Last Cry is my first book. Career in Caregiving is my second book. Both can be purchased at www.beverlybaldwin.com. And I will definitely autograph it for you and ship it out to you. And you can also follow me on Instagram at the Beverly Baldwin Agency and also Facebook at Beverly Baldwin or Memories of a Daughter's Last Cry.
So I am so happy that you came on to
Thank you
talk
for
about
inviting
this
me.
today. You are so welcome. My audience knows I'm not that one person. I only talk about this. We're gonna touch on so many different things because this life is a journey with bumps and
Yes.
bruises, ups and downs. I know
Mhm.
this year I think I've been more on a psychology tip where I'm like, we are going to do what we need to do for ourselves and
Mhm.
recreate who we want to be. We're going to dig
Mhm.
deep. We're going to fix some of these things. We're going to manage things and we're going to move forward in our own
Mhm.
power.
Mhm.
So, go on Beverly's website, take a look at everything. I see what it do said. I'm gonna have to replay this. Go ahead and replay it.
Yes.
You see, I got my pen and my paper. I was taking my notes. I've been a caregiver for 11 years, and every time I speak with another caregiver, there is something that I learn about how to make my journey a little easier. So when you all ask me something and I say no, I'm gonna be like, Beverly told me.
You can put it on me. You can put it on me.
say no. And if you love me, you will understand why I said no. So,
And you know what? And I'ma still stand on that. I
right.
still stand on it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I see we have people in the audience. Val says she's been 30 years a caretaker. So
Wow.
definitely, she says she's going to watch the replay. Definitely watch the replay. Definitely reach out to Beverly. Her information is listed below as well. So you can click on that, reach out to her, grab the book. She says she will autograph it for you. Make sure you like this video if it was helpful for you. Subscribe to the channel. You can click the bell for more videos, and you can also share this video will stay on there. So if you know someone that needs this information, if you know somebody that's suffering in silence like I did for so long, I wish Beverly would have talked to me years ago. But if you know somebody that is suffering in silence, that they're a caregiver and they need this assistance, share it with them. We just don't have enough people like us that's doing what Beverly has done with us. And tell your dads, tell your husbands, tell anybody. What is it, 40 now? Anybody 40 and up? Is it 40,
Early,
Beverly?
earlier. If it's
What's
family
it?
trace, it's 35.
35 if you have family history.
And don't let, if you say 40, don't let them tell, because the insurance will pay for it. I'm saying
Okay.
that because I started getting my grandmother passed from breast cancer, and I started getting mammograms at 33.
Okay.
Insurance will pay for it. They'll try to tell you they won't, but they will.
They will. I started mine at 30 because my mom's a survivor, breast cancer
Mm-hmm.
survivor.
Mm-hmm.
So 35 for prostate if they have a family history.
Yes.
40 if they do not, correct?
Yes.
Make these men go. They do not go, they will not go. You make them
Please.
go. You make them make the appointment. This is treatable. I won't say it's 100%, but it's probably at least 99.
Mm-hmm.
If you it's one of those things where if you have to have a cancer, especially for men, prostate is the easiest one to treat. So right now, make them make their appointments. Tell them tomorrow we're going to go ahead and make your annual appointment. Make sure they do that PSA and they get checked. Women, make sure you're doing your mammograms every year, like Beverly said. And in my experience, they start 10 years early if they have a family history. I started at 30. Beverly started at 33.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't educate each other on taking care of one another, then nobody else is. We are dying in higher numbers, even though we have a lower percent of cases of
Yes.
prostate cancer and breast cancer.
Yes.
And it's because we are not going to get checked. We are not doing that one check a year. We're putting it on the back burner. And if we're going to scream, like you said, Beverly, self-care, 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 that's part of self-care too. Self-preservation is self-care.
Yes.
So do what make sure y'all make those appointments. And I love it. So let's see our last comments here. Lauren said that was fantastic. This helps purge so many things caregivers are going through.
Yes. This is why we do this. I love it.
Yep.
Love it.
They're going to make sure they get the replays. So definitely listen to the replays. And an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much for joining in. Make sure you share this. Lauren said, make sure we throw in there. Women need the breast ultrasound with the mammogram because it's more detailed. I do the ultrasound with the mammogram, and insurance does pay for that now, especially if you have dense tissue.
Yes.
So thank you for that. We are out here advocating. We are all going to get this taken care of.
Yes.
Even if you don't have insurance, you can do free mammograms.
Yes.
So. Yes. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. Catch the replay, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and share this. Let's save a life today.
Thank you.